divorce with dignity, divorce without going to war, a kinder, gentler divorce. These are just some of the taglines for a new type of divorce that's sweeping across our country. Known as collaborative divorce, its goal is to reduce, in some cases, eliminate the angst and anger that goes along with traditional divorce. Appreciate you joining us. My name is Craig Hildahl, and I'm a financial planner from Central New Jersey. And joining me today are several of the leaders in our community and the various professionals that are involved in the collaborative process. To my right here is Jody D'Agostini, who's a certified financial planner. Next to Jody is Amy Wexler, who's a mediator and a family law attorney. And there's Dr. Phyllis Marganoff, who does a great job as a family psychologist. And rounding out our panel today will be Amy Shamal, who's also a mediator and a family lawyer in Central New Jersey. So let's start talking about what this whole idea of collaborative is, in fact, what it's not. Let me start with you, Amy. Give you guys some background information on what collaborative divorce is all about.
Sure. I'll tell you a little bit about how it's different from the traditional litigation. In collaborative divorce, the parties transition. It's a way for them to transition through the divorce in a very respectful way. They agree not to litigate. They and their attorneys sign an agreement that they won't litigate. It's a private, confidential process. There's no public record. There's transparency in providing information and communicating between the parties and their counsel. They settle their case by a series of meetings between the parties and counsel, and they may bring in other team members to help them round out the team to address their issues. And at the end of the day, they're going to save a great deal both financially and emotionally in going through the process. They're going to control it. They control the timeline. They decide when to meet, how quickly they want to proceed, and emotionally it's just a much better way for people to go through this and end up in a better place at the end.
So just so I understand, in a collaborative divorce, both couples are pledging not to go to court.
That's correct. They actually sign an agreement that they will not litigate.
And by not going to court, does that allow you and your other advocates in the process to provide more of a value added to your clients, perhaps some more creativity than you would not necessarily be able to have had you gone to court?
Absolutely. Actually, about 98% of all cases settle before they go to a trial. We're doing it over here without involving the court system. So we're able to be very creative to come up with solutions that are going to work with them, to bring in other professionals to help us with those solutions in a much better, more neutral way than going through the court system where we're doing things in a different way, a more litigious way, a more adversarial way. So the attorneys are still advocating for their specific clients, but the overall goal is to reach a resolution that works for everyone.
So you keep emphasizing the fact that the couple will have control. There's also a minimization of emotions and cost. I want to talk some more about the members, the team members in this process. Amy, could you go into more detail about the team concept?
Sure. Collaborative divorce is all about team. And the core team are the clients and their attorneys. So that always is part of the collaborative divorce process. And the focus is always on what, as Amy said, is going to work best for the family unit. How is this family going to transition into their new life and move forward? Issues come up in a divorce that are sometimes beyond the scope of what a lawyer can do to help a client with. Emotions run high in divorces, and mental health professionals can be brought in, their specific roles that they can take to assist the family in the process. One is the divorce coach. That person helps with communication, helps facilitate communication between the other members of the team, between the parties. That person helps keep focused when things get tough and people maybe want to feel like throwing in the towel. The coach can really help everybody stay engaged in a productive, forward-looking process that resolves the issues, which is why everyone's there. Another role for a mental health professional, and Phyllis is going to talk more about this, I'm just going over it briefly because it is a team approach, is a child specialist who focuses on the needs of the child and maybe talks to the children. We don't bring them into the meetings with everyone else on the team, but this person talks to the children and brings their concerns and their needs back to the group, back to the parents, so that an appropriate parenting plan can be devised, and everyone in the group understands what it is that these children are needing. And a third group of professionals are financial professionals who provide a wide variety of roles as part of the team, helping both of the parties understand their finances, looking at budgets, understanding tax advantages of different scenarios. And the team works together. They're all collaboratively trained. There is specialized training for the collaborative process. And they're all engaged sort of in an overarching manner to work towards what's best for this family and to help them meet their goals for themselves and for their children.
So just to help me here a little bit and to paraphrase, I see the traditional divorce as being kind of like the Kramer versus Kramer, the movie of several years ago, kind of an us versus them mentality, a slash and burn if you would. I get that. How would you describe very briefly how that compares to mediation as well as the traditional? Specifically, let's go into more detail. What is the difference between collaborative and mediation?
Right. Mediation and collaborative are both alternatives to Kramer versus Kramer. They're both focused on solving problems instead of making the divorce the problem, which in something like Kramer versus Kramer is what happened. So it doesn't have to be an ugly process. It can be a cooperative and collaborative process in any event. But mediation is when the couple meets with a mediator who is a neutral person. It's always a mediator doing it, who does not give legal advice. That person does not serve as an advocate for either of the parties. In collaborative, both parties have an advocate. They have an attorney. And although the attorney is an advocate for that party, the view still is the well-being of the family and that person's well-being within that larger dynamic. So you can have attorneys come into a mediation process, but it's still the parties pretty much deciding how they're going to handle things. And the mediator is a neutral facilitator.
Okay. I know before we even started chatting about this on our video, you guys were talking about how emotions can run very high in not just a collaborative, but obviously in a litigated case. And so, Phyllis, I wanted to ask you more about your role as a family psychologist, and specifically I'd like you to address the role that you play in minimizing emotions and increasing communication where there might be an issue with communication.
Okay, first of all, when a couple decides to decouple, they're moving into new territory, and a couple without children has to redefine their individual lives. A couple with children has to redefine the meaning of family, because even though a couple decides to no longer be married to one another, their parenting role continues when there are children. And very strong emotions get generated, and they need to be managed, because otherwise children are very confused by the intensity. And I always say intense emotion is like secondhand smoke. Everybody breathes it even if you can't see it. So the role of the mental health professional is to help people know how to articulate those feelings in a positive, useful way. People need to know how to talk to each other, the divorcing parties that is. They need to figure out how to talk to their children. They need to know how to talk to friends. They need to know how to talk to the extended family. And that's one of the things that a mental health professional can help with. Figuring out the timing for talking, the words to use.
So I understand this. Does the divorce coach in this collaborative setting, is the divorce coach's role it's not to save the marriage?
Oh, absolutely not.
So what happens in a situation, which I'm sure is very prevalent, where a couple comes into the collaborative process and perhaps one or both already are in counseling? How does your role jive with the fact that they already have established relationships with other professional counselors?
Well, the role of the divorce coach is to help the process of transitioning and redefining what family life is going to be all about as they move through from marriage to divorce. And while a therapist helps people with their intense feelings and setting goals and making plans for the future, the divorce coach focuses specifically on the experience of the divorce.
Okay, so we've got an explanation from two advocates and a neutral. So let's talk to you, Jody, about a minute about your role as the financial advisor. And specifically, I'd like you to make sure our audience understands the different roles you can play, both as an advocate and as a neutral in the collaborative process.
Okay, Craig, I can represent either one party. You'd be an advocate for that, and particularly that can be useful for somebody that hasn't really handled the money or the finances in the house and really hasn't a good grasp of what they have and where that will take them in life. Or I can be a neutral for both parties, where I'm there just sort of evening the playing field and saying, okay, this would be a good solution for both parties moving forward. So I've functioned in both manners. You can be a certified financial planner to do this, a CPA, or a certified divorce financial analyst. Those are the professions that are involved generally as a financial professional. We help answer the big question in collaborative divorce and in other divorces. Everybody's wondering, am I going to be okay? So we put it down on paper. We start with a budget. We try to get a pre-divorce and a post-divorce. What's your life look like now? Your marital lifestyle. Let's see what it's going to look like. Let's be more forward-thinking. Where are you going to be in the future? And can we get there reasonably with the resources that the family has? We look at the finances overall and how it's going to be divided, and after it's divided, what it's going to look like for each party, the person giving and the person receiving the assets and the alimony and child support. We look at the tax implications of that. We do cash flow projections, so we look at where they're going to be not only just for this year, but going forward and maybe even into retirement all the way through the rest of their lives. What's it going to look like for the kids? You want to fund college. Is that a goal of the family going forward? How's that going to look like? How's that going to affect your cash flow down the road? And what should we do about that to create some solutions right here and now? So essentially, we function as an educator and hopefully a facilitator for the process, because the finances are a big portion of what's the undecided in divorces.
Finances. It's a hot button and a hot topic. Let me ask you, I think I know the answer, Amy, and the two Amy's. You charge hourly rates in this type of a process?
That's correct.
That's yes.
Okay. Phyllis?
Likewise.
An hourly rate?
Yes.
And Jody, I know there's a range of how financial advisors can be compensated. How do you charge in this type of a setting?
Yeah, for divorce financial planning, we charge an hourly rate as well.
Okay.
Craig,
Yeah.
going back to the team approach, the entire team doesn't have to be involved at every step and in every stage of the collaborative process. So there may be several meetings that are team meetings, but some of those meetings may be attended only by the core team. Some may be attended by the core team plus a child specialist. Some may be only bringing in a financial person. So the cost isn't that you're bringing all these professionals in and incurring a cost for all of the time spent for all of those team members. They're brought in as needed.
It's an as-needed basis.
Absolutely.
And actually having the team approach can actually bring the cost down, because you come to resolution quicker because you're getting to look at it in a larger scope. You know, you're looking at the overall consequences and it's sort of out there until you've decided what it's going to look like. So it can actually bring resolution to the process a lot quicker. And Phyllis can function to keep the emotions at bay and try to get more task-oriented towards the goal of getting this divorce accomplished.
You know, as you were answering the various questions I brought to you, you mentioned team, and you're obviously all licensed in your chosen profession. Is there additional licensing, different groups that you're involved to? How do you get involved? If I want to get involved in this collaborative process, does each participant, each team member, have to be a collaboratively trained individual, and how does that work? Amy, I want to ask you that.
Yes, each team member takes collaborative training. There's courses that we take that are available to each profession to become part of a team. So we do take that training to become part of a collaborative team, and then we are part of collaborative groups.
Let's talk more about that. Let's say I come to you. Take me through the process. You know, I've heard that you are a collaboratively trained attorney, and I come see you. Walk me through the process that would get me from walking through your door initially, trying to find out more about collaborative, to actually getting involved in the collaborative process, to getting a collaborative divorce.
Okay, so you're a client coming into my office, and most people start a divorce process by going for an initial consult with an attorney. So if somebody's coming into me, they may be asking for collaborative, or they may come in and not know anything about collaborative. I'm going to explore with them, after I talk to them about their case, the alternatives they have. They can litigate, and I tell them about how that works, like they can mediate, or they can go through a collaborative process. When I explain the collaborative process to people, they're very favorably inclined to it. If I have someone who's financially insecure, unsophisticated, and uncomfortable, having someone like Jody come into the process is going to make them feel more comfortable. If I have someone that's very emotional, or the other side's very emotional, having someone, a coach like Phyllis coming into the process is going to help them. So they quickly see how this benefits them and their family to get through, to transition through this divorce. And as I talk with them, for instance, if I have a business owner, this is a way for them to go through a divorce in a confidential, private way. So their business information doesn't become part of the public record. It's all kept within this confidential process. And if we need to value that business, we have collaboratively trained forensic accountants who we bring in, and they do an abbreviated report. They meet with everyone. They do worksheets. They don't have to do a full-blown report, and they come back to the group and report on the value that they've found, and we resolve the issue at a fraction of the expense and a fraction of the time. If we have a case with custody issues, Amy mentioned before, future thinking. We ask the client, how do you want this to impact on your children? 10, 20 years from now, how do you want your children to remember this period of their lives? And the client is going to say, I don't want it to be traumatic for them. So we help them see how this can help them. We ask them, how can you help that happen? How can you help your children? And they quickly see that being in this type of a process is a much healthier way to go than going through a traditional litigation custody fight. So
we had talked earlier about the role of the financial advisor, and you had given us a specific example of how you asked Jody to run several alimony child support scenarios. Why don't you spend a couple more minutes about that, and Jody, you can follow up with Amy on what brought you to that part of the collaborative process where you said, hey Jody, I think we could really use your help in this area.
What was interesting in this case you were mentioning, we had a situation where one of the parties thought they were entitled to a certain type of an arrangement financially as far as support. But we as the professionals could see it was really leaving the other person in an unfair situation. So by having Jody run different scenarios, we were able to show the parties exactly where they left out. That allocation of the assets or of the income would leave one party with substantially more of the income and the other party with not enough to live on. So running different scenarios let that person who was looking for more understand that that wasn't fair. So having a neutral financial person involved helps everyone look at the deal, figure out what can work for everybody and what's a fair outcome at the end of the day, so everyone can move forward in a better way.
You mentioned one of the real positive parts of working with a businessman who perhaps does not want their private knowledge made public, which is obviously a positive, why collaborative would work. Let's be fair and balanced, as they say. Amy, tell me a scenario where collaborative wouldn't be appropriate, where it wouldn't work.
Yeah, I actually believe it's appropriate in most cases, and before telling you where it might not work, I think people's instinct is, boy, this is such a collaborative, nice process, everybody's sitting around and talking and getting along. What if I don't get along with my spouse? What if it's really angry and hostile? There are people who think that's not an appropriate case for collaborative, and that's not true. Because you can bring in the team, you can bring in the coach, and you really can help educate people, as Phyllis was saying, to find another way to relate to each other, especially if they're children, because the family is going to be in a transition, but it's not disappearing. So even families with high conflict, lawyers and the team, again, it's a team approach, can really help keep that under control so people can get through it. But there are people who shouldn't do collaborative divorce. Someone who's trying to hide assets or in some way not disclose what their true finances are to the other spouse, that's not someone who should be in the collaborative process, because transparency and disclosure are required. If people have serious psychiatric problems and really can't come to the table in a way to work together, they're not going to be appropriate for the collaborative process either. But I think most people are appropriate. Most cases can be handled collaboratively.
You mentioned earlier, Amy, that you have these various team members who may or may not participate in a particular collaborative case. Phyllis, let me ask you, when is it most appropriate to introduce your profession into this whole process?
Well, of course it varies from case to case. In terms of the educational function, it can be very helpful right at the beginning for people to have a session or two with a coach to kind of get the lay of the land from the emotional perspective. And so I would say, in general, it smooths out the process to have a couple of meetings with a coach, with a divorce coach, and get educated, learn the tools that are going to be handy to have as you get into the nitty-gritty of the meetings that are going to be the place to hammer out your plans for the future, how this family is going to look in the future.
Have there been any recent cases, I'll call them the Hollywood types, that have done collaborative that perhaps has had a direct impact on the number of cases that you're seeing?
Jody knows the Hollywood statistics.
Well, there was talk that Robin Williams did his divorce collaboratively, and some discussion that Madonna might have done the same. So,
Didn't the Goslings do it collaboratively?
yes, I heard that as well.
So help me here. I'm just thinking out loud. If I come to see you, Amy, and I think that the collaborative process is a great idea, and I want you to be able to talk to my spouse about that and perhaps give her some guidance on who she could talk to, how would you go about trying to find a good match for my spouse?
Right. First of all, I can't talk to your spouse. Once I've met with you, if I'm going to be your attorney, I cannot have a meeting with your spouse. And there are ethics rules that apply to attorneys in New Jersey and probably all the other states as well that preclude that from happening. So what I would do is educate you about the collaborative process. I would guide you to materials, to websites. There's a lot of good information, and I think clearly set forth and persuasive information about why this is a good process. And I might have to arm you with all that information to go back. And I don't mean arm in a combative way, but give you those tools to go back to your spouse and talk about this process and do some reading. There's some good books about it. Go on the internet and look at it. And you are really in the position of persuading your spouse at that point why this is a helpful, healthy process. And I can give you names of people in our collaborative group or other groups who practice collaboratively, and hopefully your spouse would go see one of them and decide for herself that that was something that she wanted to do with you.
We can even go a little bit further. We can do what Amy said, but if somebody thinks, so my spouse needs this type of personality, we can even help the people explore what type of a lawyer they think their spouse might work well with, and help them even narrow down the list of names to certain people that we've worked with that we think might work with them, or financial people we think may work well with them. So as we're doing this, as we're in the collaborative process, we get to know the other professionals doing it and are able to help guide our clients to make the right choices, to come up with the right team.
I would add that this question of how to persuade your spouse or ask your spouse to consider it would be a place that a divorce coach might be asked to participate, because possibly you would say to your spouse, let's go talk to somebody about ways we might achieve our goals in this divorce. The goal of doing it peacefully, maintaining our resources, and not damaging our children. And let's go talk to somebody who can help us clarify that. And out of that, it becomes absolutely crystal clear that the way to do that is collaboratively.
That brings up another good point, because you asked before how people come to the process, and very often they come to the process not just through lawyers, but through their therapist or through their financial advisor. So if somebody wants to find out more about it, they can ask those professionals as well, because very often Phyllis will recommend it to patients, or Jody will recommend it to people she's working with as a way, if they're going to go through a divorce, if they need to do that, that this is probably the best way to do it.
You're going to have to see your families at functions from here on in, so let's try to keep the new redefined family as intact as possible going forward. And I think most people would choose this alternative to the divorces they've seen displayed in the media and amongst their friends. I think divorce itself is difficult enough, so the process doesn't have to add more to that. And I think more people are more fearful of the process than actually the divorce, the finality of the divorce itself. So if this can pave the way to more civilized divorce, which it does, I think most people opt for it. I was talking with clients recently. A woman had come in to see me, and several children. It was a long marriage to a professional, and they had common goals that we could get out when we were doing some original financial planning. And the goals were to kind of keep their assets, not spend it down to professionals, attorneys, and accountants, and the like. And to move on for the children. They had a special needs child. They want to make sure that child was taken care of. So now we've established things they actually can agree upon, and let's take those and move forward in the process to make sure that those goals are met. And they got on the same page and were able to move forward, both with collaborative attorneys.
It seems that you as individuals in this process in general is very resolution oriented.
Yes.
You're not looking to drag out the process. You're looking to advocate when you're an advocate, or also be a neutral, with the intent of protecting your clients, but also trying to get this process done in a timely fashion so that there's not a drain on assets or emotions and things like that. Is that a fair kind of takeaway from this whole process?
It is, but we come from this. You know, Amy and I come from being trained as litigators and having practiced that way for some period of time, and realized how dysfunctional that it is for families. So we do this because we really believe that it's a better way of resolving the issues in a divorce. And I think you've seen people in the nasty divorces, and Phyllis, as a mental health professional, has certainly seen the ugliness that can come from the process. And I think we all come to this really seeing this as a wonderful alternative for so many people.
And I would add to that because I do so much work with couples who come to me initially because they want to try to make their marriages work, as it becomes clear that some marriages simply are not made in heaven and they're not going to work, people come to a place where they hope that if they can't have a good marriage, they can have a good divorce. And collaborative divorce is a process that allows them to feel empowered and feel good about reshaping, redefining what their relationship is going to be for the rest of their lives.
And they've come to the conclusion themselves. They've decided on the solutions. It's not imposed on them by any court system or any attorneys or some professionals. They've actually come to the decision, so the buy-in's a lot better. So going forward, the resolution should be clear and people will stick to it.
You know, I just kind of following up what you were saying, Phyllis, I know I was speaking with Amy about one of her clients as to why that gentleman chose collaborative over litigated, and he said, I want to dance at my daughter's wedding.
Yeah.
I think that kind of says it all, doesn't it, about the kinder, gentler approach to divorce.
I mean, I say the process of deciding to divorce is kind of like a shipwreck, and everybody ends up in the lifeboat, and the adults have got to figure out how to get that lifeboat back to shore, sharing the resources so that everybody's going to survive the process. And that's what collaborative divorce does.
That says it pretty well. Yep.
Agreed.
I want to thank everyone for participating in today's discussion. We thank you for joining us. At the end of this particular video, you'll see some contact information for me. I'd like you to call me. I'd love to chat with you more about the collaborative process in general and put you in touch with the professionals that were here today. Thanks again. Take care.
That was very good.
Yeah, it was excellent.
You did that very well.
Yeah, really.
Good.
And you carried the weight.